We need to talk about the masterpiece, the phenomenon, the perfection that is Mob Psycho 100, with its fittingly legendary ending. I must admit, despite never having been let down by Mob Psycho before, I had my doubts going into its last episode. With the way things had so rapidly escalated in the past 2 episodes, and the fact no one was able to stop Mob on his rampage until now, not Teru, not Ritsu or anyone else, it seemed like an impossible mission for Reigen to stop him in a way that doesn't feel rushed. And don't forget, we also need to tie all the loose ends of every character's arc before the episode ends. It just seemed this episode had too much to accomplish for the literal last 24 minutes of this anime. However, boy oh boy, did it absolutely deliver. Mob confronts his hidden side, which has gone berserk. Even though Mob in the previous episode had denied that that other side is him, the other side begs to differ, as he considers himself to be the true Mob, the Mob that wanted to be accepted and not hidden, even if it resulted in mass destruction. He reveals the reason he fell in love with Tsubomi a long time ago was that she didn't treat him any differently, and didn't consider his powers as something special. That is the reason he rejected all the people who came before that point to tell him they accept him as he is, as he doesn't need acceptance as someone who is different, but wants to just be viewed as any other ordinary person, despite his powers. Reigen, my man, was the star of this episode, without a doubt. Telling Serizawa he won't need his help and that he can keep on going alone, despite the debris flying all over the place and facing difficulty even walking due to Mob's immense power. The fact he didn't turn back despite Mob actively pushing him away, and instead kept on pushing and pushing forward, even revealing he was secretly working out so he wouldn't lose to Mob. And then, the theme of the first season played over this scene, making it all the more emotional and intense. Despite being thrown around in every direction and despite all the odds being against him, Reigen didn't back down until he was finally able to reach Mob to talk to him. All that, of course, with backup from our favorite green boy Ekubo, and it was just a very joyful moment to see our iconic trio united again for this finale. Ekubo's arc might have come to a close a few episodes ago, but this mad lad won't go down that easily. Initially, the first thing Reigen says as he reached Mob is that he had no idea. However, the deceptive implication that he had no idea that Mob was capable of such destruction, as obviously he is aware of how powerful Mob is quickly turned on its head. After much pushback from Mob, Reigen finally reaches him again to tell him that what he actually had no idea about was the fact the two of them had so much in common. Despite the fact that it mainly comes from his poor life decisions, Reigen is similar to Mob in that he hides a side of himself from everyone around him due to his insecurities. He admitted to Mob that he has in fact no power, and that he was hiding the true him, who is deceptive and a liar. Even though Mob knew about Reigen's truth all along, as evident from his hidden side telling him that Reigen is only a conman taking advantage of him, it was different hearing the truth from the man himself. Mob prior to going berserk always had a lot of respect and admiration for Reigen, in the same way that Reigen valued Mob's opinion of him and did not want to lose his trust by revealing his truth. In Season 2, Reigen, who was exposed on a television show for being a scammer, which went viral and caused his reputation to be in shambles, had absolutely nothing more to lose. It is at that moment that he ran across Mob, waiting for him in the street. He asked Mob if he knew, to which the boy replied, "Knew what?" Reigen gave half answers such as, "The things that are on TV," but he couldn't bring himself to outright say it. Mob then affirmed that he always knew that Master Reigen was a great person. Reigen, reassured by Mob's answer, never brought up this topic again, until now. And thus he finally comes clean and apologizes for his mistakes, admitting to Mob that even though he was initially only taking advantage of him, their relationship eventually became something genuine, and that there is a person now who understands and supports him unconditionally. Hearing from the man he always admired and followed, that everyone has a side of themselves they keep hidden, and that he is no exception to that, just happened to be exactly what Mob needed to hear. It also showed him that him and his hidden side can coexist, without one hating the other. This confrontation is finally able to quell Mob's rage, and he comes back to his senses. And thus, after our hero confronted and made peace with the final antagonist, namely, himself, he can finally attempt his long-awaited confession. It is almost another parallel that Reigen had to muster all the courage to speak the truth to Mob, giving Mob the final push to gather all his courage to confess. And for the first time, Mob's count reaches to a 100, not signifying that he is at 100% of the way to the explosion, but 100% ready to make the move he's been getting ready for the past 3 seasons. Mob heads to the agreed location, and Reigen and Ekubo wait for his return, ready to support him regardless of the outcome. A few moments later he comes back, telling them he has been rejected. He seems to have taken it well, but naturally he cannot help but break down in tears soon after. Reigen comforts him, like a true Shisho, telling him that he's still in the beginning of his journey, and rejections are part of it, and all these experiences will ultimately make him a fine adult. Although none of us wanted to see our boy sad, especially after we saw how much he struggled with his self-esteem and how much he worked to better himself and build up the courage to confess, this outcome was probably for the better. Tsubomi and Mob didn't talk much or spend time together during middle school, so it would be a bit weird had she accepted him like that. Moreover, just because our boy had so much growth doesn't make him entitled to getting his feelings accepted. At this point, Mob is at a point where he would not be devastated by a rejection since he no longer needs validation from his crush to feel loved or accepted. However, it was still wholesome Tsubomi waited for him, showing consideration for his feelings, and things ended in an amicable way. I know a subset of people will think this ending was underwhelming or not the most grand thing they imagined. However, we must remember that Mob Psycho was never about the flashy fights, at its core it was all about the journey of self-discovery that Shigeo Kageyama went through. Shigeo or Mob's journey reached a satisfying conclusion with him being a confident, ambitious, but still down-to-earth person, who is not afraid anymore to express his passions, and who has many friends standing beside him. All of which, we get to see a final time for this ending. It is just so wholesome to see that all the major characters and allies we've seen over the course of this story are in a good place, and found something to do that makes them feel fulfilled, or at least are on their way to find it. Seeing them all come together in the end to celebrate Reigen's birthday, in complete contrast to the previous year which, if you do not remember, happened at a time when Reigen was hated by everyone and only Mob remembered back then, gives me serotonin for possibly the entire following year. Of course no series or ending can be perfect, and there are minor complaints like, how come they featured all the characters that were ever involved in Mob's life for the final arc, but his parents somehow didn't play any role in his story? Was Mob never charged or detained for destroying the whole city, considering he was caught on cameras and seemingly his clubmates recognized him at the very least? What happened to this guy? Also, was it necessary for this scene to happen if Mob needed any trigger to release his power and go berserk? However, regardless of these minor nitpicks, Mob Psycho 100's ending, in my opinion, lived up to the legacy that this work has built over the years, and this is definitely an anime that will only get better on rewatch. Thank you Mob Psycho 100, for taking us on this wonderful journey, for making us experience all these funny, intense, and emotional moments. You truly were a legend, and will be remembered for years to come. And as a wise Shisho once said, I'm not crying, it's just my allergies.